Yo, this is crazy to me. Check this out. So, I'm here in the beautiful country of Nicaragua, and everyone here is just so nice. But Nicaragua is considered to be a third world country. What makes a third world country?
Third world countries today, huh? Well, alright. But in order to get a better understanding on what is a third world country, we're going to have to dig into a lot of history. So to get started, let's take a look at how the term first world country started. It's the mid-1900s, and planet Earth is in the middle of the Cold War, which was a period of time when every single country had to pick from one of two sides, the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc. You see, the Cold War was the result of World War II. That pretty much ended, leaving two superpowers fighting to spread their ideal vision for the future. The United States and all who teamed up with them were known as the Western Bloc, and the Soviet Union and all their teammates were known as the Eastern Bloc. Sprinkle some human behavior into the mix, and you have two superpowers hungry to spread their vision to every possible space on Earth, which for the Western Bloc was capitalism, or the idea that an economy and governing is based on private ownership driven by profit. And for the Eastern Bloc was communism, or the idea that an economy and governing is based on public ownership, driven by everyone for everyone. Hold up. Although that might be what most history books will teach you, it's very important to note that last part was very controversial. Some say the Soviet Union weren't communists, but instead they were socialists with the goal to become communists. Others say the Soviet Union were just straight capitalists, and some even say the United States weren't capitalists due to some of their practices. These are some of the issues that you get when two major groups refuse to talk to each other and create their own definitions and narratives. But due to the scope of this episode, we're just going to stick to the common capitalism versus communism theme. Now, let's get back into it. Now, this Eastern-Western Bloc conflict was so divided that it was often looked at as being two totally different worlds. Although still not commonly called First and Second World yet at this point, it's said that this is where the thought of First and Second World came from.
I see. So that explains the origins for first world countries, but what about the origins for third world countries?
Right. So, you're either with the Eastern Bloc or the Western Bloc. But what if you wanted nothing to do with either power-hungry side? Well, that is actually how the Third World was created. In 1952, Alfred Sauvary, a French population expert, made the Third World term popular while talking about France before the French Revolution in a French magazine. You see, in France before the French Revolution, the French society was broken up into three groups: the clergy, or the first estate, nobility, or the second estate, and commoners, or the third estate. In the magazine, Alfred compared the Eastern and Western blocs to the first and second estate of pre-revolution France, and called every other country who was not with either bloc as the third estate, which is said to make the term third world country popular. Now, how the first world got assigned to the Western Bloc and how the second world got assigned to the Eastern Bloc, you ask? Well, based on my research, the Soviet Union never called themselves the Second World. In fact, they never called themselves the First World or any world for that matter. They commonly stuck to the communism versus capitalism theme. But obviously, because the US, or the Western Bloc shall we say, won the Cold War, that was the narrative that was made popular. As Winston Churchill puts it best, history is written by the victors. And last thing I want to clear up about this. Ever since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, there has been no official definition for the three worlds. Because again, it was created for two superpowers that wanted to spread their power even more for possible war. But with the Cold War over, the first world no longer had competition. There no longer was a second world, thus making the three-world model outdated. But of course, as you know, the three-world model lives on as a bunch of new unofficial definitions. And so, if anyone tries to correct you by defining the three worlds model these days, just politely inform them. There is no official definition, and it's all up to interpretation now.
Very interesting information. So, how did Nicaragua become a third world country?
Well, believe it or not, Nicaragua actually started off as a first world country. Let's take a deep dive into the super rich history of Nicaragua, and you'll see what I'm talking about. In 1912, due to the U.S. wanting to protect U.S. property from Nicaraguan problems, the U.S. occupied Nicaragua, which allowed for the Somoza family to come to power and rule from 1936 to 1979. Now, the Somoza family was a family dictatorship that had the support of the U.S., and so when the Cold War started, naturally Nicaragua became a first world country. But then, Nicaraguan citizens grew tired. You see, the Somoza dictatorship was believed to be the cause of many problems in Nicaragua, from inequality to corruption, starvation, and more. So, thanks to the Somoza family representing the United States, the Western Bloc or the First World or whatever the hell you like to call it all, clearly was not the answer for a frustrated new group of insurgents called the FSLN, or the Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional. The FSLN, supported by Cuba and other Second World countries, eventually gained control of Nicaragua, which then made Nicaragua communist and a part of the Eastern Bloc / Second World. Well, kind of. Because you see, here's where it gets confusing, because the real question is, how does one define communism? What does a communist look like, talk like, act like? Because if you define communism as the want of all for one and one for all, then aren't we all communists to some extent? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually got to use a Matrix reference. I love that series so much.
Who cares?
Third row, I know you said that.
Me?
Yeah. Anywho, the FSLN were called communists only because they were backed by the Eastern Bloc. But if they actually practiced communism is a whole other question. So much so that when another party won the election in 1990, putting the FSLN out of power, they peacefully handed over governmental powers, which to me sounds a lot like a democracy. So, a communist democracy? So confusing. But the question still remains, why do we call Nicaragua a third world country today? Well, let's continue. The year is now 1991. I was just born, but you don't care. What you care about is that the Soviet Union fell this year, ending the Cold War, and most Eastern Bloc nations lost their power. The Eastern-Western Bloc conflict was no more, which meant the first, second, and third world definitions were no longer useful. But thanks to the US and teammates winning the Cold War, they were able to redefine the three world models by having the bigger stage. And so over time, the first world became generally defined as countries that rival the US in likeness, second world as countries that model after the US but don't quite have it all there yet, and third world countries as underdeveloped countries. This new world's model has been pretty much refined to be, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you like the US? Side note, even with that popular redefining, depending who you ask, not everyone sees it that way. Seeing as Nicaragua lost US aid when the Eastern Bloc supported FSLN came into power, and the Eastern Bloc themselves lost almost all their power and couldn't support Nicaragua, Nicaragua's underdeveloped status and non-comparability to the US grouped them right in with a new definition for third world countries.
Wow, that's very powerful stuff. But the question I've been thinking about this whole entire time is, what is the perception here on first world countries?
Well, what better way to soak in modern day Nicaragua than from the locals themselves? I want to first start with Raymond. When we first met him, he was working at the local bakery, and here's some of his thoughts on the situation.
If I can choose about stay here or United States, I wanna move in United States. I wanna do that, why can't do that? It's a good opportunity for going in United States. Change your life, you can work all day, you can make money. I think you have to work very hard. And also, I think it's very good for me and my family because I wanna change my life. I can do something different. I learned to speak English just for 2 months in my bilingual center of academy.
Wow.
For 2 months.
That's so
Oh my
good. For 2 months?
Yeah, for 2 months. I just want to play football, soccer, watch TV every day, listen to music. That one is my real life. Yeah.
Raymond shared a really interesting perspective that I feel was a pretty common representation from my experiences while there. But next, I want to present to you JC, a Nicaraguan native that grew up in the US, but now is a teacher in Nicaragua's capital.
Well, I think in the United States, one is a little bit more sure of things, even if they're not sure. But we're kind of sure in the United States, hey, I'll do this and I'll do that, and I won't do this and I won't do that. Whereas here, specifically in Ometepe, Nicaragua, which is where we have to be subject to nature, to many things we understand we don't control. Things happen because it's nature taking its course. In the United States, we seem to have control over the scenario in our minds, even when we don't have that control, we think we do. From what I've read, a third world country is, with the poverty indexes that they indicate, sure. Those indexes based on what is here. So yes. Now with that said, does everyone here have a terrible life and everyone in the United States have a great life? If we're speaking of the United States, I know there's other developed countries within the United States, but the answer is obviously not. There's a lot of people here, even among this extreme poverty, that are smiling, ear to ear smile. And that, to this day, after many years of living here, almost 20 years of living here, I don't have an answer for. Because some people may not have to eat here.
I find that JC gives a really insightful perspective from the older generation. But what about an insightful perspective from the younger generation of Nicaragua? For this, I want to present to you Maricela, a political science graduate with a lot of interesting stuff to share.
America, when you say America, people basically think in United States of America. There's something that we have to establish a difference. For example, I'm from Nicaragua. I'm from Central America. America is the continent. America is not United States of America. What I really enjoy of Nicaragua is the entire country is a place surrounded by nature. So I think that's our best privilege or our best gift. Actually, scientists said that it's better, people is happier when they are always in contact with nature. So this allowed me to, I think, to be more sensitive or a better person. Historically, our population, our people has suffered a lot, but these people never stop smiling. At least poverty is not in our hearts. People tend to make mistakes, and I don't conceive any one, second, or third word. For me, it's just one word. That's the difference that we have created between ourselves, and that's the difference that are still separating us. For me, it got no sense at all. It's like just a human definition, and because it's a human definition, it can be perfectly a mistake.
Maricela's had so much good stuff to say about the whole third world country situation. In fact, everyone that I interviewed did. But due to the flow of this episode, I could only fit in a portion of what they all had to say. However, if you're interested to hear all the interesting stuff that they all had to say, I put together a little documentary in which you can all check out. The link is at the top of the description.
Wow, very interesting stuff today. So, in conclusion, what makes a third world country is more than just poverty and lack of education. It also takes community and lots of knowledge of the natural world, which, from my experiences, it feels a lot closer to what it means to be a human. And in terms of third world countries, before this trip, I believe the common perception for third world countries, it's dirty, it's nasty, the people are bad, and there's just nothing good here. But the truth is, there are good and bad people everywhere, and just like you and I, everyone wants a fair chance at this game called life. What great information, and what a beautiful country. But today, I have one simple question for you.
Have you ever traveled outside of your own country?
Cast your vote by clicking that question on screen. It should be in the top right corner. And if you're on mobile, feel free to cast your vote in the chat section. Oh man, we've had a lot of fun here in Nicaragua, I won't lie. But I think I'm ready to head back to the States and eat lots of pizza. I sure do miss my pizza. However, I'd like to recommend this trip to any of you guys that are willing to, try something new, get out the country and experience a third world country. And with that, we've listed all the Airbnbs that we stayed at in the description, and I recommend every single one of them for you guys to try out, if you are willing, of course. But whatever the case may be, remember to always feed your curiosity.